Well, it's a pleasure to be here in Hyderabad, a city I have visited before and loved immensely. I also know that this city could well play a very significant role in the next week. I say this fully aware that Pavan Varma, person who I have great respect for and admire for a diverse range of writings, for his brilliance and felicity with the language, and who has, after a distinguished career in politics, in diplomacy, moved now to politics, and I'm sure he's thinking of some of these things as well. I don't know how many of you have seen the book, but this is it. It's called Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's Greatest Thinker. And this book comes after Pavan has written about the Havelis of Delhi, Ghalib, like I said, a really big range of subjects. So today I feel that if I were to introduce this book to you, I would say it's an amazing travelogue. A travelogue of cartographies that are spread over the length and breadth of India, a travelogue of the sacred sites and sacred geographies that were the result of the effort of a man unique. He passed away at the age of 32. A travelogue of his thoughts, and the most interesting and fascinating part of the book is its linkages with contemporary science and the realization that the world is having of this. So this is a book that's achieved the award as well, but I feel that in writing this book or in choosing this subject after so many diverse subjects, Pavan, you have in a way put together your past and your present career. Because to write about Hinduism at a time when in India religion is turning out to be more of a divider than a unifier, and we have this whole issue of Hindutva, Hindu philosophy, Hindu religion. Why did you choose to write on one of the greatest thinkers of Hinduism?
Thank you very much, Arshia. And let me add my voice to yours to say, what a great pleasure it is for me to be in Hyderabad. This is a city where this book has not been launched. I want to thank Algebra for the opportunity, and it was a great lacuna in my book's career that it had not yet been formally launched in Hyderabad. This is the opportunity. Thank you. Arshia, Hinduism as a religion has no one God. It has no one only text. It has no one only temple. It has no one only pope. It has no one only prescribed ritual. In other words, Hinduism is a way of life. And while that is its strength, because that which is undefined inflexibly is by its nature eternal. But that also leads many of us who are practicing Hindus to follow the way of life and become somewhat adrift from the deep philosophical underpinnings of this religion. In fact, Hinduism as a religion and Hinduism as a philosophy cannot be separated, because otherwise religion becomes merely ritual. So the reason why I wrote this book was to go back once again to the remarkable philosophy, the sheer compressed cerebral energy that constitutes the core and the foundation of Hinduism. And if you are adrift from it, then you are not able to tackle the somewhat illiterate voices that speak in the name of Hinduism. And often, when you cannot tackle those voices, because when they say to you, this is Hinduism, and you are not yet fully aware of what Hinduism is by a knowledge of its basic tenets at the philosophical level, then It's an unequal argument. It's an unequal fight between those who claim to speak for Hinduism and those who are practicing Hindus but are adrift from their philosophical moorings. And so that is why I wrote this book.
So, could one of the reasons why people are adrift from its philosophical moorings, as you call it, be located in the fact that Hinduism's texts are in Sanskrit? And if you don't want to read a translated, which means a filtered version of what its philosophies are, today Sanskrit is an exotic language in India.
I don't think you need to know Sanskrit. You may need to read my book.
Yes.
Because the Sanskrit texts are given as part of an anthology with their meanings. But it's not necessary to know Sanskrit. It's important to know some of the basics, that we have three foundational texts of Hinduism: the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. It's important to know that there are 6 systems of Hindu philosophy: the Nyaya, the Vaisheshik, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Purv Mimansh, the Uttar Mimansh, which is also Vedanta. It's important also to know about giants in the intellectual field like Adi Shankaracharya. One of the great rewards for me in writing this book was when I come across young people who are saying, we had heard of Adi Shankaracharya, but we didn't know which century he lived in. What did he write? What were his views? How did they correlate with the other philosophical schools of Hinduism? And to bring this to them as far as possible in a readable manner, the sheer profundity of thought, indeed the audacity of thought, which few religions in the world can claim to have, although I have the highest respect for all religions in the world.
You know, you've used the word audacity, and that really brings me to one of your chapters which talks about the audacity of Shankaracharya's thought. Now, audacity is not a word that we who sort of have this great hierarchy around religion ever use with reference to any of our spiritual leaders.
Arsha, imagine some 4,500 years ago, a group of saints, seers, thinkers, sages, leaving the rudimentary cities that were coming up and retiring to the forest, where they have a dialogue, a search, a quest, a journey, an investigation, not about conventional divinity, not about a god. The Upanishads, which are written precisely in these forests as a dialogue between a guru and a shishya, they are an investigation into what could be the ultimate truth, not what is the God. They are not searchers for the divine in the conventional terms that we know it. They are searchers of the ultimate truth that could explicate what is that which is the substratum of our puny lives that we lead every day and the bewildering complexity of this cosmos of which we are a part. Nitya Anitya Vivek. What is real? What is unreal? That is the search. If this is not audacity of thought, where some 4,500 years ago a group of people can say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahm. Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art. I am Atma Brahm. The Atma and the Brahm are the same. They are not talking of God. Brahm is that all-pervasive, pulsating, cosmic consciousness pervading our lives and beyond. It is adrisht, unseen. It is achintya, beyond thought. It is akhand, indivisible. It is purna, complete. It is nirvishesh chinmatram, undifferentiated consciousness. It is sarva pratyay darshanin, all-knowing. And above all, and this is the audacity of thought, it is nirguna, beyond attributes. To try and define it is to circumscribe it. So when asked what it is, the answer is neti neti, not this, not this. And that pulsating consciousness, of which I will, when I come to science, I was amazed. I've done history and law. And it was a great struggle on my part to study quantum physics, neurology, and cosmology. But you begin to see the correlations between that audacity of thought and what the latest discoveries of modern science are showing. And you begin then to understand actually how audacious that thinking was. So this is Brahm. And that Brahm informs our life and defines it, and that is the only truth. Jo asthai hai, asthir hai, parivartansheel hai. That which is subject to change, that which is unstable, and that which is impermanent cannot be the truth. So there is obviously some other truth, which is anant, anadi, eternal, and all-pervasive. And that is the notion of Brahm. And from that is derived then who are we? And what is this life about? Jabke tujh bin nahi koi maujud, to ye hangama-e khuda kya hai? As Ghalib put it. So if that is the only reality, what is this? And so the structure of thought says that that is, and this is and is not. It is, because we are all part of it. But it is not in an ontological sense. In an absolute sense, it is transient, it is passing, it is impermanent, it is unstable, and therefore it cannot be in the eternal sense. Ultimately, the only thing that matters is this pulsating cosmic consciousness whose only inferential experience is awareness and bliss. Total awareness and unalloyed bliss. And those who have experienced it vouch for it. And that experience transforms your life. And that which you give importance to then becomes relatively less important. And that which then is becomes relatively much more important, so much so that so much of the antics of your life which absorb you all the time don't matter that much to you. But why do we make that difference, Arshia? Why do we make that error? It's a dosha of perception. And there's a very clinical analysis of the mind. The mind consists of buddhi, intellect, of I-ness, ahankar, ego, and of pure awareness, which is chitta. As you are aware, the mind is never silent. Even when you wake up at night, it starts ticking away. As the Buddha said, the mind is like a monkey that jumps constantly from one branch of a tree to another. And the sense of I-ness is, I think, perhaps the greatest illusion that the unreal can create. Na main hota to kya hota? If I was not there, there would not be. That sense of I-ness, when you accompany that with the mind, that is the greatest barrier to your understanding what the real can be. The moment you still the mind, and there are ways to do it, including meditation. The moment you still the mind by observing it, the mind stills. And when the mind stills, the sense of I-ness becomes dormant. And then that chitta, that great awareness within you, which is lying somewhere marginalized and at the boundaries, becomes central. And with that, everything changes. everything changes in terms of perception. So it's a great misinterpretation to say that Shankara in his Advaita said that the real world does not exist. It exists, but it doesn't exist in an absolute sense. It's like the famous analogy of the serpent and the rope. When you mistake the rope for the serpent, so long as you don't realize that the serpent is the rope, the serpent continues to exist in your mind. The moment you realize that the rope is actually a rope, not a serpent, the serpent ceases to exist. So it's a change of perception. And Adi Shankaracharya, essentially his Advaita doctrine is developing the profound but scattered truths of the Upanishads. And he was born in the 8th century in Kaladi in Kerala.
That was what I was about to come to.
And he died in Kedarnath, all in the age of 32 years.
For a young boy, fatherless boy, born in Kaladi, how do these ideas start accumulating in his mind? Then he sort of churns them. He travels and he gets inspired by Kashmir Shaivism. He has debates with even Assamese scholars. That's an area of interest for me, so I'm asking you particularly this question. So just explain.
He's obviously a child prodigy. At the age of 3, they say, and actually I wrote this book in the midst of a very busy political career. And it is not easy to compartmentalize your time between the ridiculous and the sublime. So, but still, it's a matter of time management. But I didn't write this book apart from the philosophy of it. And it also links itself to the other schools of philosophical thought in one chapter, a small chapter, so that you have an overview of the entire philosophical canvas of Hinduism. Apart from that, this is a travelogue, as you rightly said in the beginning, where I traveled from Kaladi all the way to Kedarnath and to Badrinath, on the way to Omkareshwar on the banks of the Narmada, where he went first to his Guru Govindapad. And from there he went to Kashi, the Harvard of Asia. But we have such a short sense of history now. This is the 8th century, just 1200 years ago. No one can actually say where he lived in Kashi. Such a towering mind. We think about sadis, of great aeons, but not of recent history. And from Kashi, he travels, and in the space of 32 years, he sets up the 4 mutts. One in Sringeri, one in Puri, one in Dwarka, and one in Joshimath in the north, which if you look at it 1200 years ago, is the civilizational map of India. South, north, east, west. And all of this in the space of 32 years. So his life itself is fascinating. Quite apart from his philosophy.
His life is indeed fascinating. So I think that you should tell us the story of his unusual relationship with his mother and how he manages to get her to agree for him to be an ascetic. That's really quite a cute story. Child prodigy indeed. Little badmash.
No, I mean, his mother was a widow. Shankaracharya was born late in the marriage. And when he showed signs of becoming an ascetic, the only child, obviously his mother was distressed. And she prevents him from leaving home to become a sannyasi. And so the story goes, and if you go to Kaladi, there is still next to their home, next to Kochi where Kaladi is, there is on the Purna river, there is a crocodile ghat, even today, where annually a mela is held. There is so much you learn when you go outside your study and begin to travel. So that crocodile ghat is there because the story goes that when his mother was not giving him permission, once while swimming in the river, he said, a crocodile has caught my foot. And his mother was on the banks. And he said, either give me permission or now I'm gone. And this kind of moral blackmail succeeded and his mother gave permission. That's the story, but Crocodile Ghat still exists there. Similarly, when he had that dialogue with Mandana Mishra, see, I'll tell you one thing, and that's why conversations is important. We have a tradition of civilized dialogue, of Sabya Samvad, where you may disagree with an opponent, but you can have a dialogue with respect with that opponent. That space is shrinking in our lives today. And politicians have contributed the most to demolish it. Just look at television, for instance, where I am often required to be. But here is a man, Adi Shankaracharya, who, because Hinduism is eclectic, it's inclusive, it's conversational, it's based on dialogue. It's not a diktat. It conquers by its ability to assimilate and to transcend. That is Hinduism. So here is a man, Adi Shankaracharya, still young, traveling from Kashi, and he has a debate with someone called Mandana Mishra, which I describe in my book. And the place where that took place is disputed, but if you travel from Omkareshwar on the Narmada to Maheshwar, there are at least 3 places marked with murals built that this is the exact spot on which the debate took place. Although others claim it to be elsewhere. But they have built these spaces where actually the platform is there where the debate took place, which changed the evolution of Hinduism. Can you imagine the level of intellectual energy in a debate in a time when the communication was difficult and we did not have, by God's grace, social media? How news could travel? How news could travel? 2 men sat down. Mandana Mishra believed in Karma Kand, the path of karma to moksha. Adi Shankaracharya believed in the Gyan Marg, the path of knowledge that ultimately leads to moksha. And there was within Hinduism some very strong opinions on these divergences towards the same goal, because all the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy are not talking about God, but what can be the ultimate truth. But what that ultimate truth can be was interpreted differently by different people. And so Mandana Mishra and Adi Shankaracharya sit down to have a discussion. And although they are so resolutely opposed to each other, they have it in a civilized way. That discussion lasts for several days, if not weeks. And all of Hindu India is following it by word of mouth over a period of time. And Mandana Mishra, look at the civility of the debate. Mandana Mishra's wife becomes the umpire of the debate. And Adi Shankaracharya readily agrees, because you expect people to be impartial and objective. And when Mandana Mishra loses the debate, Mandana Mishra's wife, Ubhay Bharti, says, he may have lost the debate, but I am one half of him. You will have to debate with me. And Adi Shankaracharya, otherwise well disposed to debating, said that as a sannyasin, he would not like to debate with a woman which was misogynist. But she insisted and he agreed, but then she began to ask him questions on Kama Shastra. And the story is so well known, ordinary people talk about it. It's in every known biography or hagiography of Adi Shankaracharya. So there has to be some substratum of fact behind it. So she begins to ask him questions, Arshya, on the Kama Shastra, and he begs her that I'm a sannyasi almost by birth. So this is not an area about which I have knowledge, but since she was so insistent, he takes 30 days time from her. And so the story where fact becomes fable, fable becomes mythology, mythology becomes storytelling, but all of which is about essentially demonstrating a point of view. The story goes that Adi Shankaracharya, after leaving Ubhay Bharati, when he had 30 days of time, accosts a young prince who has just died. And his body is being taken for cremation, and by his mystic powers, he reincarnates himself in the body of the prince, who miraculously becomes alive. And Adi Shankaracharya leaves his own kaya or his own body in a cave, and that cave too is marked on the banks of the Narmada even today. I'm trying to show to you where belief, fact, and fable intertwine. In the story, in the telling of the evolution of spirituality and religion. And so this, now in the body of this young prince, he returns to the palace. And the young prince has many wives. And he learns about Kama Shastra. In fact, he begins to enjoy it so much that he forgets what his real calling is. And the story goes that he has to be reminded by some of his disciples as the 30 days deadline began to approach, who began to sing in his presence Nirguna bhajans. And suddenly he remembers what his real calling is. That incidentally is an illustration of another of the truths of the worldview of Hinduism. There are 4 Purusharthas in Hinduism: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Each has validity. In fact, Vatsyayan is asked in the first chapter of the Kama Sutra by an imaginary interlocutor, which again goes to show how dialogic our civilization was. An imaginary interlocutor asks Vatsyayan, why do we need this book? And Vatsyayan says, there are 4 Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Each of the first 3, Dharma, Artha, Kama, pursued in proportion and not in exclusion, lead automatically as part of a balanced life to the 4th, which is moksha. Therefore, the pursuit of the sensual also, in proportion but not in exclusion, has philosophical validity. That is the logic. Among the 22 books I have written, I have one on the Kama Sutra also. But no one reads the book because they only see the illustrations. But it's actually a very important book for illustrating a point of view. So anyway, the short point is that Shankaracharya comes back. He is now well versed. If 30 days can ever make anybody well versed, comes back. Comes back and has a debate with Ubhay Bharati, where he wins and she becomes his follower, as does Mandana Mishra.
So I am one of those who believes this fable, mythology, history, myth, this, that, and the other, because some of you may have read a wonderful book of love poetry called Amaru Shatakam, 100 Poems of Amaru. The prince whose kaya he enters, leaving his own, is Amaru. So I really believe this story, okay? Yes, now I'd like to come to the most important part, what I really think. So the book is amazing in a way because he has this little bits of Sanskrit in it, which makes it, you know that you're in the right direction, this is genuine, authentic and all that. And then you turn one page and you come to a chapter, that's the chapter that links this Advaita philosophy to internationally approved and internationally worked concepts of science. And that is really quite fascinating because very few people, I haven't read another book like this, which focuses so clearly on the scientific broad strokes as your segment on science does, linking Advaita to science.
No, very briefly, and it's a chapter I would like you to think about. It's called The Remarkable Validation by Science. You can agree with it or you need not agree with it. But if you begin to correlate the definition of Brahm, this all pulsating cosmic consciousness, with some of the findings of science now, there are startling revelations before you. For instance, Brahm is amatra, infinite. Now you all know that we are a part of the Milky Way. Our galaxy is 50,000 light years across. Light travels at the speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. And our galaxy alone is 50,000 light years across. But now cosmology is showing that there are at least 125 million more such galaxies, each with at least 100 million stars twice the size of the sun. In fact, our scientists recently discovered a new cluster, a new galaxy called Saraswati, and I want you to configure the figures in your mind, which is 600 million light years away from us and 400 million light years across. So this already mind-boggling universe, now cosmology is showing it continues to expand every second at the speed of light. What is it expanding into? Does it create space? Or is there infinite space beyond it? Because it expands, continues to expand at the speed of light. In other words, it is infinite. One of the attributes of Brahm is that it is anant, without a beginning, a finite beginning or end. Now you all know that the universe, as cosmology has mapped it, is 13.7 billion years old. And we talk about 3000 BCE and 2000 BCE. The universe as we know it is 13.7 billion years old. But scientists are not happy with having just said that. They said there must be a finite beginning. And as you all who've read Stephen Hawking and others, there became the theory of the Big Bang. Yeah. That there was one finite moment when an infinitesimally small speck underwent a remarkably inflationary expansion and the universe unfolded out of it. The Big Bang theory. And that had currency for quite long. But now scientists are saying that if there could be that one moment of inflationary expansion, why can't the film rewind backwards and come back once again to that infinitesimally small speck? There is nothing in science which says that this could not have happened in the past as well. In other words, time becomes cyclical. Srishti, Sthiti, Pralay. Srishti, Sthiti, Pralay. The eternal cycle of time, Anadi Anant. A third attribute of Brahm is that it's akhand, indivisible. I don't have too much time, but very briefly, just one experiment, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiment, EPR. If you take two spinning electrons, their momentum of revolution is the same, but if placed in the precise same axis, one will rotate clockwise and the other counterclockwise. So scientists took one of the electrons, let us say we are in Hyderabad, the other to Seattle. And they found that the moment they were placed in exactly the same axis, they acquired instantly a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. Now this is faster than the speed of light. How does this information communicate itself? And there are many other examples aside. I was only giving you one, where everything in the cosmos, although not understood by the limitations of our own mind is at some level interconnected, and therefore it is indivisible. For instance, a fourth inference of the entire theory of Advaita is that that which is and is not. In fact, you've all heard of the notion of Maya, with that it is there, ephemeral. Now, quantum physics has made scientists completely reconfigure their notions of empirical reality. 96% of the universe is dark matter about which we know very little. A man called Einstein came along who said, time and space are relative. Matter and energy are interchangeable. Today, I'm giving you just examples. You cannot define what are the elements of a particle. Essentially, as you sit here, you are seen in this form by my sensory abilities, but essentially you are simply empty space with waves of energy. The whole microscopic world is in constant flux, which completely and radically changes your notion of reality as it exists and as you see it. Another element of Brahma is that the inferential experience of it is that of pure consciousness, which is marked by awareness and bliss. Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham. Na mai raga dvesha, na mai moha lobha, madho neva mai neva matsarya bhava, na dharmo na chartho na kamo na moksha, Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham, Shivoham Shivoham. Incidentally, to even say Shivoham Shivoham in many religions would be blasphemy. Shankaracharya says, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Because once you've experienced that bliss and awareness, you've transcended all limitations. So that consciousness, that sheer awareness permeates this universe. Max Planck, Schrödinger, Einstein himself said that there is a unitary consciousness pervading the universe, otherwise the universe is entirely inexplicable. That consciousness comes first and matter is derivative. But what about this notion of bliss and awareness, this experience we have once we come in touch with Brahman, with the Chit in our mind awakening? Please read what is happening in the laboratories of Harvard. A practiced meditationer sits down to meditate in a neurological lab. A string is tied to a small finger. And as he is about to slip into the deepest moments of meditation, he gives a tug on that string, which alerts the scientists. And they do a speck of his brain. And the entire configuration of the brain begins to change into cool blues. In other words, the mind is completely silenced. The notion of the individual self is overwhelmed. And every such practiced meditationer's only inferential experience of that experience is that of pure bliss and pure awareness. Na punyam, na papam, na sokhyam, na dukkham, na mantro, na tirtham, na vedo, na yagna. Aham bhojyanam neva bhojyam na bhokta. What remains? Chidananda Rupa. Shivoham, 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 Shivoham. So today, science, and this is just a very brief summary of that, science is validating many notions of the sheer audacity of concept of some of our sages and seers. And that correlation, in my view, is a possibility. Judge it on merits and reject it if you don't believe it.
What an amazing exposition it is From the light of Advaita to the black holes, as you called it, to the realization of the infinitesimal neutron or whatever that can,
Proton, gluon, boson, photon. There are 200 particles that are swimming around right here. And they can't be measured or their momentum measured at the same time. A particle is a wave is a particle. That's quantum physics for you.
So I'm going to take you a little bit away from it because we've come to the first bell already. And I'm glad that you mentioned Shivoham, Shivoham, because much of Adi Shankara came to me initially via watching a lot of dance. So Shivoham, Shivoham, Bhaja Govindam. And also the fact that his they're known as Peets, the institution, and Shakti Peets at that. So you have a lot of mishmash of what used to be the verticals of Hinduism, the Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Shaktism, but he puts it all together and it holds.
You see, Shankaracharya plays a clever sleight of hand. Sleight of hand. He is known as Shanmat Sthapanacharya, as a man who is able, while retaining his unyielding fidelity to the notion of Advaita, to be also simultaneously assimilative of many religious traditions. How does he do it? He divides knowledge itself into two parts, Paravidya and Aparavidya. In the state of Aparavidya, he sanctions everything. That is, Paravidya is ontological knowledge, transcendent knowledge, which comes to you when you have experienced that bliss and awareness, which transforms your life in a transformative way. But until then, in the state of Aparavidya, he sanctions yoga, he sanctions bhakti, he sanctions prapatti, he sanctions atma samarpan, he sanctions puja, bhajan. He says, so long as they prepare your mind for that paravidya, and they are not for abhyuday only, that is material gain entirely restricted to the individual self, they are all right. That is why he could write bhakti stotras, apart from this somewhat dry notion of Brahm, Nirguna. He could become Sagun in a minute and write a beautiful stotra as part of a Paravidya, preparatory for the Paravidya on Krishna. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam Mudmate, Samprapte Sannahate Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshate Dukra Karne, Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janini Jathanam Shayanam. Ehi Sansare Bahu Dustare, Kripya Pare Pahi Murare. You can't have more lyrical poetry as pure bhakti. So there's no contradiction because he allows Vidya. As far as the second part of your question, Shakti, every mutt of Shankaracharya has a Shakti Peeth. And he is supposed to have established the Sri Chakra himself personally. And that is the link between Advaita and this validation of divine female energy, which Shankaracharya somehow bridged, the Shakt cult and Tantra. And that Tantrism, even if when I went to Sringeri this time, as part of my journeys, his mutt in the south, there is a book on the Shakti cult and linked to Shankaracharya. I can only say in a modern context, he gave perhaps even more importance to the female principle than to the male.
Thank you very much, Pavan, for being so expansive, clear, and articulate about what the book contains. I think the book is a very helpful tool for people like us who, live in urban India, or have been distanced from our roots, to enter it in a comprehensive manner and understand what you're writing. So my last question to you is, India abounds in religions. Many of them have defining texts which we still don't know. Really, honestly, everybody assumes they know, but they don't know. I have met Muslim friends of mine who do not understand the Quran that well, Sikh friends of mine who do not understand the Guru Granth Sahib so well. So, can we hope that you would write this perspicaciously again on one of the other texts? Or will politics take over your life?
Well, it has a tendency to, and your talents lie in resisting it. But when I wrote my major book on the biography of Mirza Ghalib, then people wanted me to do a book on Mir, Zauq, Faiz, and the rest of it. It becomes difficult, but all I can say to you, although I'm on contract with my publishers, is to say that my next book is an attempt to bring to the widest number of readers one of the greatest works of literature, which is also in the area of religion, and it's called Ramcharitmanas by Tulsidas.
Well, thank you very much. Please don't get up. We open it to questions.
Nope, we'll just go into a break. Pavan will hopefully be both signing books and taking questions offline.
Okay.